My son called after 5 years of silence, not to reconcile but to gloat. His voice cut through the noise of my machine shop like a knife. "Don't bother coming to Mother's will reading tomorrow," Victor said, his tone dripping with satisfaction. "Her $25 million fortune is mine alone. I'm Carl Martinez, 58 years old, and I've been working with my hands my whole life. Right now, I was grinding a custom bracket in my small workshop when that call came in. The smell of cutting oil and hot metal has been my reality for the past 5 years, ever since I got pushed out of my own company. Every tool in this place has its spot worn smooth by years of honest work. There's something pure about shaping steel. It doesn't lie to you, doesn't stab you in the back like family can." Victor's name on my phone screen made my stomach drop. We hadn't talked since Linda's funeral was announced last month, and even then it was just a text saying I wasn't welcome. I let it ring 3 times before answering. "Old habits. The will reading is tomorrow at 10 a.m. He continued without any hello, Davies and Coleman law offices downtown, but save yourself the embarrassment. Your name isn't in it. She left everything to me, the whole $25 million. I could hear him enjoying every word. This was his moment. Martinez Precision Manufacturing is mine now. The house in Riverside, the investment accounts, all of it," Victor went on. "I just thought you should know so you don't get your hopes up sitting there in your little machine shop that hit where he intended." This was a fully equipped precision manufacturing facility, but he had to make it sound small, just like his mother taught him, Martinez Precision Manufacturing. The company I built from scratch in a rented garage with borrowed tools and big dreams. 22 years later, it was worth $25 million, and my own son was telling me I had no claim to it. Why would you even want to show up? Victor laughed, that cold sound I remembered from his teenage years. "You enjoy public humiliation? I'm telling you straight, you get nothing. The suburban house, the company headquarters, the whole operation. I'll be there," I said quietly. "Suit yourself. 10 a.m. sharp. Try not to embarrass yourself more than necessary." He hung up before I could respond. I stood there in the quiet workshop, phone heavy in my hand. The anger was there, sure, but underneath it was something else, a cold, calm feeling I hadn't let myself feel in years. It was the feeling of an ending and a beginning that night. I pulled out an old storage box from the back of my closet. Martinez Personal was written on the side in my own faded handwriting. I hadn't opened it in over 15 years. Inside were photos of me and Linda from 2002, both of us young and full of energy, standing next to our first CNC machine in that cramped garage. We looked invincible back then. We looked like we could take on the world together. Beneath the photos were the original blueprints for the precision tooling systems that launched our company. My designs, my calculations, my handwriting on every technical specification. Linda's name appeared next to mine on the business documents, but the engineering work was all mine. At the bottom of the box was what I was really looking for, a thick legal envelope yellowed around the edges. The divorce decree from 2006. 18 years ago, but I still knew every word. I turned the brittle pages carefully, past the sections that signed away my daily control of the company, past the custody arrangement that Linda had weaponized to turn my 12-year-old son against me. I stopped at page 17, paragraph 4. A clause I had insisted on including, one that Linda's expensive lawyer had dismissed as sentimental garbage from a broken man. He'd told her to just sign it so they could finalize the divorce quickly. Linda, eager to move forward with her new investors and her grand plans, had agreed without really reading it. My finger traced the words that had been sleeping there for 18 years. The lawyer called it unenforceable, meaningless. He was wrong about that. Tomorrow, in that sterile conference room downtown, I wouldn't be the one walking away empty-handed. I spent the rest of the night going through the technical files I'd kept from the early days. Patent applications with my name as primary inventor. Design specifications in my handwriting, evidence of the innovations that built Martinez Precision from a garage startup into a $25 million company, evidence that a proud woman and her arrogant lawyers had completely overlooked. Victor thought he was inheriting his mother's empire. He had no idea he was about to discover that empires built on stolen foundations have a way of crumbling when the real architects finally speak up. The morning came gray and cold, matching my mood perfectly. Davies and Coleman occupied 3 floors of a downtown glass tower. The lobby was all polished marble and intimidation, designed to make regular people feel small. The receptionist, a young woman with a practiced smile, led me down a long hallway lined with portraits of stern-faced partners. Each one seemed to judge me as I passed. The conference room had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. I could see the Martinez Precision building from here, 8 stories of steel and glass with our name in bold letters near the top. Our building, I'd helped choose that location back when Victor was still in high school. Victor was already seated at the head of the mahogany table wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than most people make in a month. He was scrolling through his phone, deliberately ignoring me when I walked in. Classic power move from a man who thought he'd already won. The lawyer, Terry Coleman, stood up as I entered. He was maybe 65 with sharp eyes behind gold-rimmed glasses and the kind of calm confidence that comes from 40 years of handling other people's family disasters. "Mr. Martinez," he said, extending a firm handshake. "Thank you for coming." Victor finally looked up from his phone, annoyed that the lawyer had acknowledged me. "Like I told you on the phone yesterday, he doesn't need to be here. This is straightforward. Everything goes to me." He was talking to Coleman but performing for me, making sure I understood my place in his world, which was nowhere. Coleman adjusted his glasses and looked from Victor to me, then back to the leather folder on the table. All potentially relevant parties were invited. "Mr. Martinez?" The way he said potentially sent a small tremor through the room. I caught it, and so did Victor, though he tried to hide his reaction behind another dismissive wave. "Relevant to what?" Victor demanded. "The will is clear. I've seen it. Everything goes to me." Coleman opened the folder without responding. Inside were thick documents bound in blue covers. Official looking, final looking. "Shall we begin?" Coleman said. He started with Linda's preamble, a long self-congratulatory account of her rise from modest beginnings to tech industry success. She painted herself as a visionary, a pioneer who'd built an empire through pure determination. My name appeared exactly once in passing. My first husband, Carl Martinez, like I was a footnote in her grand story. Victor shifted in his chair, barely able to contain his satisfaction as Coleman read through the assets. The house in Riverside with its pool and 3-car garage. The investment portfolio worth $4 million. The art collection she'd accumulated over the years. The brokerage account at Merrill Lynch, valued at approximately $2.08 million. I bequeath to my son, Victor Martinez. Coleman read steadily. Victor's smile widened with each item. This was his coronation. My collection of jewelry, including my grandmother's diamond necklace, valued at $180,000, I bequeath to my son, Victor Martinez. The contents of my safe deposit box, including bearer bonds and collectible coins, I bequeath to my son, Victor Martinez. The list went on. Every asset, every investment, every piece of property that Linda had accumulated. Victor had stopped looking at me entirely. In his mind, this was already over. Finally, Coleman reached the last page of the will. His voice carried the weight of finality as he read. "And to conclude, all the rest, residue and remainder of my estate, including all my shares and controlling interest in Martinez Precision Manufacturing, I give and bequeath to my beloved son, Victor Martinez, to be his absolutely and forever." There it was, the crown jewel. Not just money, but the company itself. 22 years of my life's work handed over like it was Linda's to give. Victor broke into a wide grin that he couldn't suppress anymore. He pushed his chair back from the table, ready to stand up and claim his kingdom. This was his moment of triumph, and he wanted me to see every second of it. "Well," he said, his voice dripping with false sympathy, "I guess that's it then. Thanks for coming, Carl. I know this must be hard to hear." He was offering me pity, the final insult before he walked away with everything. But Coleman didn't close the folder. He didn't stand up. Instead, he reached down beside his chair and lifted a different folder onto the table. This one was old, faded manila with worn edges and a label written in blue ink that had faded to gray. Victor's confident expression faltered. "What's that?" "There is one additional matter to address," Coleman said calmly. "The divorce decree filed on March 15, 2006, contains certain provisions that may affect the disposition of business assets." The blood drained from Victor's face. "What are you talking about? The divorce was 18 years ago. That's ancient history." Coleman untied the string holding the old folder closed. The papers inside were yellowed and brittle. "Not ancient history, Mr. Martinez, active legal provisions." He looked up at Victor, then at me, and for the first time that morning, Terry Coleman smiled. It was a small smile, professional but unmistakable. The smile of a man who was about to deliver news that would change everything. "The will your mother executed is perfectly valid and distributes her personal assets as she intended," Coleman said. "However, the shares of Martinez Precision Manufacturing are not entirely hers to bequeath." Victor's mouth opened, but no sound came out. He was staring at that old folder like it contained a bomb. "What do you mean they're not hers?" he finally managed. Coleman opened the divorce decree and turned to a specific page. Page 17, paragraph 4, the Innovation Reversion Clause. "The what?" Victor's voice cracked slightly. "A provision your father insisted upon during the divorce proceedings. One that your mother's legal team dismissed as unenforceable sentiment. Coleman began to read, and I felt 18 years of patient waiting finally come to an end. Coleman adjusted his glasses and began reading from the divorce decree. His voice was steady, professional, but every word hit the room like a hammer blow. This clause states that although Carl Martinez relinquishes his day-to-day operational control of Martinez Precision Manufacturing, his founding stake is not dissolved but placed in a dormant trust. Said dormant stake, representing 49% of the company's total shares, will be automatically reactivated and transferred back to Carl Martinez upon Linda Martinez's death, provided that two specific conditions have been met. Victor was shaking his head frantically. No way. My mother would never have agreed to something like that. Her lawyers were the best in the state. On the contrary, Coleman said calmly, the records from 2006 show her legal team advised her to sign the divorce agreement as written to expedite the proceedings. They viewed this clause as what they termed sentimental nonsense, too specific in its conditions to ever be triggered. He slid a thick document across the table toward Victor. They miscalculated. Coleman laid out the two conditions methodically, like a surgeon making precise cuts. Condition 1. The fair market valuation of Martinez Precision Manufacturing must exceed $20 million at the time of Mrs. Martinez's death. He opened the blue-bound document. This is an independent business appraisal commissioned by the estate as required by law. The conservative valuation of Martinez Precision Manufacturing as of last week is $25 million. Condition 1 has been satisfied. Victor stared at the appraisal but wasn't really seeing it. The very success he was so proud of, the growth he'd overseen as Linda's chosen successor, was the first key turning in the lock of his own trap. Condition 2, Coleman continued, reading directly from the faded legal text. If Carl Martinez is found to have been systematically excluded from engineering decisions and company operations for a continuous period of no less than 5 consecutive years, constituting a breach of the founding partnership understanding. The room went dead silent except for Victor's increasingly shallow breathing. For the past month, Coleman explained, opening yet another folder. My firm has been legally obligated to investigate whether these conditions were met. We've reviewed email servers, examined meeting records, interviewed long-term employees. He began placing documents on the polished table one after another, building a damning paper trail. These are email communications from 2019 through 2024 showing a clear pattern of excluding Mr. Carl Martinez from engineering meetings for projects he originally designed. Another document. These are security access records showing his keycard privileges were systematically downgraded, restricting him from areas of the facility he built. These are sworn affidavits from 5 long-term employees confirming that Mr. Martinez was deliberately removed from decision-making processes starting in 2019. Victor slumped in his chair as each piece of evidence landed on the table. His face had gone pale, and I could see him finally understanding what was happening. All those times he'd blocked my access to engineering projects, all those meetings he'd held without me, all those small acts of corporate cruelty he thought were asserting his authority, they were actually building the legal case for his own downfall. The documentation is extensive and clear, Coleman said. Mr. Martinez was systematically excluded from the company he co-founded for over 5 consecutive years, despite his technical expertise being essential to ongoing operations. He looked up from the papers. Therefore, both conditions of the Innovation Reversion Clause have been definitively met. Coleman's voice carried the full weight of legal authority as he delivered the final verdict. As of this moment, 49% of Martinez Precision Manufacturing legally belongs to Mr. Carl Martinez. The silence that followed was deafening. Victor just sat there staring at the pile of evidence, his mouth slightly open. I could see him doing the math in his head. The $25 million company he thought was entirely his was now split almost in half. His inheritance had just shrunk from $25 million to about $6 million in personal assets. He was still wealthy, but he was no longer the king of an empire. I was now the largest single shareholder in the company I'd built from nothing. Victor found his voice, and when it came out, it was raw with desperation and rage. This is fraud. This is a setup. You planned this whole thing. He pointed a shaking finger at me. You manipulated her into signing something she didn't understand. I'll fight this. I'll get the best lawyers in California. I'll tie you up in court for years. Coleman responded with the same calm professionalism he'd maintained throughout the morning. I understand your distress, Mr. Martinez, but everything here is perfectly legal. The Innovation Reversion Clause is part of a court-ordered judgment filed with the state of California in 2006. It's been a matter of public record for 18 years. He gestured to the evidence spread across the table. Any legal challenge would require you to prove either that the company isn't worth what 3 independent appraisers say it's worth, or that you didn't systematically exclude your father from company operations. Coleman paused, letting the impossibility of that task sink in. Given the documentation we've presented, including your own email records and security logs, such a challenge would be extraordinarily difficult and expensive. Victor's shoulders sagged as the reality hit him. The evidence was his own creation. Every email, every meeting he'd excluded me from, every petty act of corporate revenge, it was all documented, time-stamped, and legally binding. That's when I spoke for the first time since entering the room. My voice felt strange after so much silence, but it came out steady and clear. "You're right, Victor," I said. "You can fight this." He looked up at me with a mixture of hope and confusion. "You can spend the next 5 years in court battles. You can watch your inheritance disappear into legal fees while the newspapers write about the son who lost his empire because he couldn't treat his own father with basic respect." I let that image settle in his mind. "Or you can accept the consequences of your choices and move on with your life." The choice was his, but we both knew there was really only one option that made sense. Victor stared at me for a long moment, and I could see him finally understanding who he was really dealing with. Not the defeated old man he'd imagined, but someone who'd been playing a much longer game than he'd ever considered possible. "I have no interest in running Martinez Precision day to day," I continued, my voice calm and measured. "That part of my life is over." I saw a flicker of desperate hope cross his face. Maybe he thought I was about to offer him some kind of deal, a way back into power. "As soon as the legal transfer is finalized, I'm selling my entire 49% stake. Victor's mouth fell open. "You're selling it, all of it." "Every share," I confirmed. "I don't want the company, Victor. I never wanted to take it back just to run it." He couldn't comprehend this. To him, Martinez Precision was the ultimate prize, the source of power and status. The idea of walking away from it was incomprehensible. Then what was this all about? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "It was about a promise," I said. "A promise that the man who builds something deserves to be respected, not thrown away like a broken tool when he's no longer convenient." I stood up slowly. The weight I'd been carrying for 18 years was finally lifting from my shoulders. "It was about showing you that actions have consequences, even if those consequences take years to arrive." I looked at Terry Coleman. "You have my contact information for the paperwork." He nodded with quiet understanding. "The transfer should be complete within 30 days. I walked toward the conference room door, my footsteps echoing on the hardwood floor. Behind me, I could feel Victor's eyes burning into my back, filled with emotions I couldn't begin to sort out. At the door, I paused and looked back one last time. "For what it's worth, Victor, I hope you use what you still have more wisely than your mother did." Then I left him there to figure out what came next. 3 weeks later, I was sitting in a completely different kind of office. No mahogany table, no floor-to-ceiling windows, no intimidating portraits on the walls. Just a simple wooden desk in a modest brick building on 3rd Street, with a view of a small park where kids played on swings. The nameplate on my door read Martinez Foundation for Innovation Justice. I'd used every penny of the $12 and $25 million from selling my Martinez Precision shares to create an organization with one clear mission: protecting engineers, inventors, and craftsmen from being pushed out of companies they'd helped build by family members or business partners who valued politics over production. The foundation had already hired 3 of the sharpest family business attorneys in the state. We'd rented space for workshops where inventors could learn about protecting their intellectual property. We'd established a legal fund to help working people who couldn't afford to fight corporate battles on their own. My first appointment that day was a man named Dale Murphy, about 60 years old, with the calloused hands of someone who'd spent his life building things. He sat across from my simple desk, clutching a worn folder full of patents and blueprints. His story was painfully familiar. He'd spent 25 years developing specialized automotive tools, building a small but profitable business with his son as partner. Then the son had brought in outside investors, restructured the company, and systematically pushed Dale out of his own operation. "They changed the locks on my own shop," Dale said, his voice heavy with exhaustion. 30 years of work, and they act like I never existed. I listened without interrupting. I understood every word he was saying, because I'd lived a version of that same story. "The worst part," Dale continued, "is that he was a good kid. I taught him everything: how to use the tools, how to read blueprints, how to treat customers right. I don't understand how he turned into someone who could do this to his own father." When Dale finished his story, he looked at me with the desperate hope of a drowning man reaching for a life preserver. "Do you think there's anything you can do?" he asked. I looked at this decent man who deserved better from the son he'd raised and trained. I thought about Linda's empire and how all that ruthless ambition was now being used to undo exactly the kind of damage she'd specialized in creating. The irony was beautiful. "Yes, Dale," I said, leaning forward with complete confidence, "we can help you." We're going to look at your original partnership agreements, examine your intellectual property rights, and see what legal protections you might have. I pulled out a legal pad and started taking notes. Tell me about the patents. Are they in your name or the company's name? As Dale began explaining the technical details of his automotive innovations, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, a sense of purpose that went beyond my own pain. This was what justice looked like. Not revenge, not getting even, but taking the resources that came from overcoming betrayal and using them to help other people facing the same battles. By the end of that first day, the Martinez Foundation had taken on 3 cases. A retired machinist whose daughter had stolen his gear-cutting designs, an elderly carpenter whose son had locked him out of the woodworking business they'd built together, a female engineer whose brother had used family pressure to force her out of their tech startup. Each story was different, but they all shared the same core tragedy. Family members who'd forgotten that blood relationships come with responsibilities, not just opportunities. I worked late that first night reviewing case files and legal strategies. Outside my window, the park was quiet and the city lights twinkled in the distance. For the first time in 18 years, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. This story teaches us that patience and preparation are more powerful than anger and confrontation. Sometimes the best revenge is transforming your pain into protection for others who face the same betrayals. True victory isn't about reclaiming what was taken from you, it's about making sure the taking stops. The greatest inheritance isn't money or property, it's the character you build while earning both, and the wisdom to know that true wealth comes from lifting others up rather than stepping on them. Sometimes the most powerful victory is walking away from what you could keep, choosing instead to transform your pain into a shield that protects others from experiencing the same betrayal you survived.